Good evening, everyone. And this is my last evening in Singapore. So tomorrow I'm going over the waters to Malaysia and spending a few weeks in Malaysia, visiting some of my fellow monks in different places and lay supporters in KL. So I've been very pleased this last week to see all the interest in the teachings and practice of Buddhism, and people keen on applying the Buddha's teachings to their lives. You know, I was 23 before I heard the Buddha's teachings, because they didn't teach it in schools. Now they do, but nearly 50 years ago, it was just Christianity that they taught in school. So I think good fortune that you can hear the Buddha's teaching a little earlier than I did. Sometimes I sort of wonder. By the time I heard the Buddha's teaching, I was very inspired by it straight away. And sometimes I wonder, if I'd have heard it a bit earlier, would I have been similarly inspired and maybe stopped me from doing a few silly things I did in my late 20s and early 20s. But who knows? Sometimes you have to learn the hard way. I learned the hard way. But I had a good taste of what leads to suffering, and thanks to Buddha, eventually I found out the way of practice that leads to the end of suffering. So in the mid 1970s in England, not even many Buddhist groups, but fortunately I heard about these monks living in this house in Hampstead, North London, and I was working as an engineer in North London at the time. So I thought I'd go and pay them a visit. So I knocked on the door of this house in Hampstead in London one Sunday afternoon, and I was invited in and downstairs to a room where I had the good fortune to meet Ajahn Sumedho. And I can't remember what we said, but I found it very good, very helpful. And it was Sunday, and I think I must have been there for a few hours, because he said, "Oh, do you want to come for meditation now?" I thought, "Oh, no, that's enough for now, meditation." But, So I left before the meditation, but then I came back and decided to give it a go, because at that time before I discovered Hampstead, I did actually go to the Buddhist Society and find books on Buddhism. Because in the bookshops there weren't even many books on Buddhism, so I had to go to the Buddhist Society in London. So I was getting all these books and reading them avidly, absorbing all these wonderful teachings. But eventually I realised I'm reading the same things over and over again. So I thought, where do I go from here? Where do I go from here? And it seemed to me that the practice of meditation was the next step. So I did decide to go and meditate with the monks in Hampstead. Not every night, but especially Sunday night. Because Sunday night, after meditation, Ajahn Sumedho would give a Dharma talk. And Dharma talks I found very helpful. And I found that going there on Sunday night, meditating, I learned the chanting over time too. And meditating, listen to Dharma talk, it put me in a good state of mind for the week at work. And the first time I learnt about the importance of wholesome company, association with the wise, yeah? And the influence of that, the example of Ajahn Sumedho, the monks there, and the teachings was very inspiring. Yeah? So I was inspired to really apply those teachings in my daily life. But in Western society, everybody drinks. Well, most people drink, and that's what you do socially. You go to the pub and drink and socialise, and generally don't talk about particularly profound things, football and things like this, But then, the Buddhist precepts, what do I do? Go out with my friends or keep my precepts, And I decided that mainly to keep the precepts, yeah. And the times I did go out with them, I just drank orange juice, and they criticised me for it, and go on, have a drink, the sort of peer pressure. But I was determined to. I'd seen the effects of drinking too much on the quality of mind, because I was doing some meditation now. I was much more aware of the way things affected the mind and the quality of attention. And alcohol really was really inhibited a clear mind and the quality of good attention. Yeah. So I had a very good incentive not to drink alcohol anymore. But then just reflecting on the precepts and how I was at work, and the things I would talk about and talk with the people at work. So I stopped also getting caught into backbiting, talking about people behind the back in not very nice ways, because again, I saw the results of that. When you get into really good backstabbing session, actually you don't feel very good after. Especially if you go back and meditate after you've had a good backbiting session, you think, it doesn't leave a nice sort of feeling. So in some ways I started with meditation rather than the precepts. And actually Ajahn Sumedho didn't teach the precepts initially, because he thought if he taught the precepts, nobody would come back for meditation. Because everybody sort of drinks in the UK. You start telling them about not drinking and yeah. So I really began to see the value of those precepts, because I saw the effects on the quality of mind of not following those sort of guidelines. But it was difficult, the old habits, and I remember going to this school and seeing this very poster, this very sad-looking dog, with sort of sagging cheeks, and on the poster was the words, "It's hard to be good." I thought, yeah, that's right. To sort of, go against the grain of some of these habits, because it was, I was in the 20s, I had created some unskillful habits. But, I was inspired by the Buddha's teachings and meeting Ajahn Sumedho, so I started to go in there for meditation. And then the next thing was that Ajahn Sumedho started to teach these 10-day meditation retreats in a place in Oxford. And again, 10 days, whoa, no way, And then the date was, the first 3 days of the week I had to go to a wedding of one of my university friends. So I had a good excuse that I can't go. I've got to go to this wedding up in the north of England. But Ajahn Sumedho said, "That's all right, come after the wedding." So I went, ended up going. And again, that was challenging, but I learned a lot of things from it. Yeah. Then the next year, we had a wonderful visit from Ajahn Chah, who came to visit England in May 1979. And that was very special. And he was a very special being, Ajahn Chah. And very joyful, very sharp, and a delight to be around. But very interesting with Ajahn Chah because, you know, he could be this incredible, joyful being that you want to be around, but sometimes he could be really grumpy. It's like he sort of changes persona to suit the situation and teach people. So I was downstairs, after the meditation we go downstairs, and I was just in awe of Ajahn Chah, and there was this monk sat next to me, and I said, "Oh, it's so wonderful being around Ajahn Chah." And he said, "It can be pretty awful sometimes." I was really surprised he said that. But then I heard some of the stories about where Ajahn Chah trained his monks, and particularly what happened probably around about that time, because there's this lady who invited the monks to her house in Hampstead for a meal, right? And you see, in that Hampstead Vihara, it was just the anagarikas who cooked, and the food wasn't of a great standard. So this lady invited to the house, and she produced all this very nice, tasty food, right? So the monks all sat there, "We're going to get a good meal today," And then what Ajahn Chah did, he took the first dish, took some food from it, passed it down the line, and then the rest of the dishes he just took for himself and didn't pass them down the line. So some strong teachings there, isn't there? I think if he sensed you were really looking forward to something, then sometimes you wouldn't get it. It was always fun to frustrate your desires. Yeah. I heard a similar story. Under his kuti, he used to receive people under his kuti in the monastery, and the monks would stay there for a while, but often they would go off after a while. And Ajahn Chah would sit there for ages, talking to the visitors. Anyway, one day one of the visitors brought a crate of Coca-Cola and left it, and then it's interesting how the monk who doesn't usually stay on, stays on, and stays on and stays on. But Ajahn Chah didn't give out the Coca-Cola. And then that monk goes, and Ajahn Chah, "Okay, get the Coca-Cola out." So I can see why some monks said it was quite difficult to be around Ajahn Chah, because he was so tuned in to people. And he would give some quite, direct teachings. They have this word in Thai called torman, and Ajahn Chah, it's like torture. And frustrating desires is like a torture. But if you're willing to learn, it was a good lesson. Some probably didn't appreciate the lessons and left. But while I was there, he was generally very warm, very loving, very joyful, and really meditating around him was very special. Because actually in those days I didn't find meditation very easy. Pain, restlessness, trying to stay in the present moment, whatever, trying to stay with the breath. But when Ajahn Chah was there, my mind went a bit calmer. I actually enjoyed the meditation when he was there. Usually it was just patient endurance, but actually when he was there I actually had some pleasantness from the meditation. So well, Ajahn Chah was there, I went every night for the meditation. And interesting enough, one evening he didn't even come up to the room. He was just downstairs meeting people and still had a very, pleasant experience. But then he left, and then back to normal again, back to. But it was good to have that taste of something good. That there's a possibility of finding a sense of inner well-being that wasn't dependent on just the senses, sights and sounds. So I had a taste of something which was encouraging to carry on with the practice. And meeting somebody who's a good example of the practice is also encouraging too, because it is, cultivating meditation. It's not an easy process. The things sometimes we have to deal with, the hindrances, restlessness, the discomforts, and the monkey mind. But I would say that Ajahn Chah was the happiest person I'd ever met. I never really met somebody who had that sense of joy. And wisdom too, the things he said were so wise. And he would always point to understanding where the suffering is. So the good example that happened while we were meditating at this Hampstead, because it was on the main road. It was opposite a pub where people were drinking and loud music would come from the pub sometimes. But on this particular night, I think there was some group that were practicing because they were sort of playing the same old song, and they weren't very good either. I think they were just practicing. So we all sat there in the meditation, listening to this not very nice music. Anyway, the meditation finished, and the first thing Ajahn Chah said to us, he said, "You thought the music was annoying you, but in truth, you were annoying the music." Because we tend to, that's annoying me, that's the cause, rather than seeing the causes in one's own mind. Well, think about music, for instance. One type of music, like rap, for me, rap's just a noise. I must admit. But for some people, they like it. So the like and the dislike is not in the music, is it? It's in the mind, isn't it? If it was in the music, everyone would like it. Because some people like it, some people don't like it. It's in the mind, isn't it? So, if we don't like the music, it's not the music's fault, it's the mind. If it was the music's fault, then everybody would dislike it. So this is a very good teaching, and I always kept it in mind when I was in places where there were unpleasant sounds. I would remind myself, are you annoying the music? And then, when you look at it like that, it's the annoyance lessens, you accept it more. Because you see the truth of it. If you see the truth of it, then you don't blame, you look to the solution in one's mind. And the next stage is really, the music's still there, but you can actually let go of the annoyance. And then the music's there, but there's just a peaceful mind. If you actually let go. And the same principle applies to all the senses, isn't there? A certain sight pleases one person, a certain sight displeases another person. So is the pleasure, displeasure and pleasure in the sight? Or in the mind? Sounds, sights, tastes, we look at taste, for instance, what tastes good for one person is not very nice for another person. So when I went to Thailand, the hot chilies, God, burnt my mouth out. How could people enjoy this? And then you hear Thai people saying, if it's not hot, it's not good. Again, it's one thing you learn about this is about conditioning as well. It's how your mind's conditioned to like something, not like something. So if you're brought up eating chilies, you get to like it. If you're brought up on just plain mashed potatoes and not very spicy food like we have in the north of England, then a very hot food is, yeah. But again, I did adjust to it. I got to like it a bit more. I still don't really manage the very hot stuff, the moderately hot stuff I can manage now. But it is, interesting to contemplate how perception works. How we perceive something conditions the way we respond to something. Now, so like noise, for instance, normally, noise is not, we prefer it quiet. But on one occasion, we just built this meditation hall in the monastery in New Zealand. We had it all ready, and it was the start of the Vassa. But the one thing it didn't have was the gas for the heating. That's the one thing. And of course, Vassa's winter in New Zealand. It's the opposite of the UK. So we had this beautiful hall for meditation, but no heating. And it was getting colder. But the good news was they were bringing the gas pipe up the road to the monastery. Yeah? So we sat there meditating, and we could, they have to drill the road to get the pipe in. These sort of drills. So this sound was getting nearer and nearer and louder and louder. But he was happy because it was bringing the gas pipe to the monastery. Because of that perception, you were really happy to hear the sound getting louder and nearer because of the perception. Now, if it had just been going next door, maybe, oh no. But because the perception was it's coming to the monastery. This is what is called actually one of the powers of an enlightened being. They can perceive something as they wish. As pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. So they have the power over perception. They're not stuck in the conditioned mind anymore. So they can look at something, they can see the beauty in it, or they can see the unattractiveness, and they can just switch between the two. They're not stuck into just seeing sort of just stuck on maybe the attractive aspect of something. So the ability just to perceive it as one wishes. Because you're going beyond the way our perceptions are conditioned. Another example, again, because we have a lot of mixed cultures in the monastery, Asian and Western. So another occasion, it was morning, morning breakfast in the eating sala at the monastery. And we use it, collect our porridge, and then we have our porridge in the morning in the sala. And on that particular morning, this sort of quite scruffy looking gentleman, maybe he was a wayfarer type, was sat in the middle of the sala. And we sat there under the smell of like sweaty feet. And we thought, this gentleman probably hasn't changed his socks for a while. But the strange thing was, it got stronger and stronger. Now, it happens that the eating sala is next to the kitchen. And the Thai people in the kitchen cooking one of their favourite dishes, which to Western nose is like the smell of sweaty socks. But probably for the Thais, oh good, we're having this today. But for the Westerners, because of the perception again, isn't it? What you're used to, the conditioned perceptions. So what was pleasing to one person wasn't pleasing to another. But maybe that is something we can do in our practice, how to... sometimes when we experience something in a negative way, maybe we can, by using our power of perception, we can switch something around ourselves in our practice. I mean, one aspect of that will be, if you perceive somebody as being a pain in the neck, right? How to change that perception a bit, but sort of bring to mind maybe something that he'd done that was good, or he or she did that was good. So just a way of changing one's perceptions about somebody. It's very important in monastic life, in community life, not to get stuck in certain negative perceptions about people, or else it makes the life in community not very pleasant. So you begin to watch how you create a perception about somebody. This person's like this or like that, if it's a negative perception. And then you try and think, but they've done something good there. So you're really challenging the tendency to get stuck in a certain perception, which tends to then condition a certain maybe negative feeling. But if you don't get stuck in that, and you can bring up other perceptions, then you find you can live with that person quite peacefully. And people change. People are not the same. Maybe one day they're a bit pain in the neck, but the next day they'll be quite friendly. And that's a good thing to remember. Not to get, just remember them as that day when they were a pain in the neck. To remember them on that day when they're a little more friendly. So that's very important in community life, not to get stuck into negativity towards somebody. And that's, using our perceptions, we can remember maybe a skillful thing or something good about that person. Or maybe just the importance of contemplating a quality like compassion. When people do, unwholesome things, it's really a manifestation of their suffering. Happy people generally don't do really bad things, do they? But people who are very troubled can sometimes do things that they're not very nice because of the inner turmoil or struggles or whatever. So that's also a good thing to see the suffering in that of a person who's obnoxious, and think, realise that person on the internal level, must be not a very happy person. So this is why the great teachers, they could all have all sorts of disciples, all sorts of characters, and treat them all with compassion. because they don't get stuck into any fixing them, people in a certain way. And that's impressive to see, that of a teacher, especially, I've seen it with my teachers. Sometimes certain, monks go through a difficult time and can be very critical of the teacher and say not nice things. People have said not very nice things about Ajahn Sumedho, but I've never heard him reciprocate it. In fact, those people that have been not very nice to him, he's actually sometimes gone out of his way to be more friendly to them, to try and change the relationship. And that's sort of like a lot of humility, isn't it? Yeah, because some monks, their character, they, not intentionally, but they just irritate people. And sometimes, people can say not so nice things about them. But, again, it's impressive when they don't reciprocate and start saying bad things about the people who criticise that. And that's one of the qualities the Buddha said of a more, you should say, superior spiritual person. They're very reluctant to talk about other people's faults. Very reluctant. You have to really push them to get any information out concerning somebody's faults. But in terms of their own shortcomings, they're very happy to share that with people. So that's a change from the mood you see in society where politicians are always trying to knock down each other. They're always going about that person's bad points. And even they try to sort of discredit their opponents by saying bad things about what their family's done. Their son's done something not very good, so they have to make that in the news, to try and defame the competitor. Knocking people down to try and uplift themselves. So that's a very egotistical mode of operating, isn't it? And it's interesting that how people can think just because a relative does something unwholesome that that the actual politician is going to be that way too. It's not like that, is it? People could be good but have not very skillful relatives. Yeah? So this is why really how the teachings of the Buddha goes against the ways of the world. Because the ways of the world is always, getting the better, getting the fame, getting the wealth, and getting praise. Where the way of Dhamma is being more modest, doing things without making a show of it. Like the former king of Thailand was a great example of a practicing Buddhist king. So you see Buddha Rupa in Thailand, they're all gilded. They put gold leaf on them at the end to finish the gold. It's not solid gold, it's just gold leaf. And the king would always go and do the bit at the back, the bit that didn't show. So that's, just a gesture of modesty, I did the fancy bit at the front, but just doing the bit at the back. And that sense of modesty and humility has always been something that is praised by the Buddha. The nice story from the time of the Buddha was when Ananda and the Sakyan princes came to ordain. So they all decided they're going to become, Ananda and Nandiya and a couple of others. They decided they were going to go and ordain. So they went out to outside the city with the hairdresser. In those days, princes had, long hair and, so they had hairdressers and things. And they gave all their jewellery and things to the because he looked after them. Gave all their jewellery to him, right? But then he thought, no, I want to ordain too. His name was Upali. He says, well, I want to ordain too. So instead of he just buried the jewellery, he left it to one side and joined the princes. So there's these 4 princes and the servant. And he got to the Buddha, and what they said was really nice. They said, Lord Buddha, please ordain Upali first. So you'll be senior to us, so we'll have to bow to him. That'll humble our princely pride. So this is how they showed the gesture of humility, and that's why they became very good monks, because they had that humility. And Upali actually became the great master of the Vinaya expert. The different monks had other different talents. Ananda was the one with the great memory. He could hear a sermon from the Buddha and remember it word for word. So he was the one who actually recited it all at the first council. Amazing memory. So that's, not the worldly way, is it? Let me go first, In Thailand, they're very polite towards monks. They always let you go first on the bus. So if you went on the train or something, somebody would stand up for you. But in England, it's not like that. In fact, it's every person for themselves a bit. So and it's good. Okay, let other people get on. Don't get caught into rushing. There's usually a seat left. And I call it my bodhisattva practice. The bodhisattva vow about not entering nibbana till everybody else has gone first. So I call it my bodhisattva practice. You go first. You go first. I'll go last. So it's so you don't get sort of treated with such admiration as you do in Thailand. But that's good for the practice, Being called names sometimes. I was on the train once, and this young guy across the seat from me, he says, "What are you then?" I said, Buddhist monk. What's that? What's a Buddhist monk? So I tried to explain something, and they said, have you heard the football results? So it's an interesting life being in the West. But then again, some people come up and want to shake your hand. Oh, you're a Buddhist monk, and shake your hand. Some people call you not very nice names. It's all grist for the mill, all good for the practice. So that's quite a change from being in Asia, where people are very polite and accommodating and treat you very well. The Mangala Sutta has one verse which I think there's 4 qualities that it mentions that are important qualities but I think sort of declining, especially in our Western society. And it's the verse about Gawa Wocha, Niwa Tocha, Santuti, Chakatanyuta. These four qualities that bring blessings. Gawa is like respect. Respect for elders, respect for older people. Yeah? So, I mean, like, one time I was waiting for the tram with my father, and he's 80, 80 odd, and he's got a walking stick, right? And the tram stops right in front of us, and the door's open, and this young guy just goes straight onto the train and sits in the old person's seat. I mean, that's how, when I was young, you'd always stand up for old people, but now, people have their headphones on and the gadgets, and they're really insensitive to the older people. The sense of respect for elders and things really seems to be on the decline. Teachers have a hard time. I remember I went to one school in New Zealand, and these were teenagers, and they were very well behaved, for teenagers. And this teacher actually confided in me. He said, I just count the days to the end of term. He's having such a hard time teaching these youngsters. So some of the old values seem to be a bit on the decline, like respectfulness, and looking out for others, elderly. Thailand was very nice. You see people coming and giving gifts to the teachers. When I was staying as a layman in a meditation centre in Thailand, there was a lady who actually helped me because she translated for me with a teacher. And she's a lecturer at the university in Chiang Mai, in north of Thailand. And her students would be bringing her nice food every day. She was on a retreat doing meditation, so her students would bring food for her every day. So the sort of respect and appreciation of teachers. The second quality of nivato is like more modesty. And the way we present ourselves. And modesty, it's about, modesty is about not only, say, always wanting attention. The way people dress and look now to get attention, isn't it? And immodest dressing and glamour and all this. People want to look in a certain way to get attention. But modesty is about not wanting to look anything special. So that's why monks wear the same robe, have the same hairstyle. Just to be modest, isn't it? Modest appearance. No stripes on the robe. Nothing to say I've been a monk for so many years. Yeah? No gold. Just one of the senior monks at Chittas, he used to go out teaching. And he was a really good teacher, and people were so thankful, and he was getting all this praise. But he said it was good to come back to the monastery and just be another bald head in the line, just for his modesty. He was getting carried away with the praise, But the things people do to get attention, isn't it now, in this day and age? Everybody wanting to look outrageous, do all sorts of things, look in certain ways to get the attention. So it's becoming more of a immodest society. Santuti, contentment. So I think this is on the decline. I think it's probably not. I don't know. It's disappearing from the English language in the West. Contentment, because it's all about getting more, isn't it? Everything is advertisements and media. It's all telling you need to have this. You need to have the latest iPhone, the latest this, the latest that, to be happy. So, of course, the people who sell these things are not going to talk about contentment, are they? You know, Lungtar Mahabor, one of the great forest ajahns in Thailand, he got criticised for teaching contentment. It's not good for the economy. Because he was a very famous monk, you know. But, you know, of course, there's obviously some people who are going to buy things, you know, that wasn't a problem really. But for those who want to practice, yeah, contentment. The young people now, a lot of discontent. You know, wanting this, wanting that, the latest this, the latest that. But, you know, really, you know, the more people get, the more they want, the more discontent they become. So it's like a vicious circle. So that's why the Buddha said that contentment is the greatest wealth. Yeah, that's the greatest wealth. If you've got some contentment in your life, you're a wealthy person. But if you're always wanting more, bigger, better, then it's not contentment, is it? You know, I remember in my working days, there was one of the people I worked with, he was a newlywed, and it's only him and his wife, and he got this really expensive mortgage, a big house, an expensive mortgage, and he had to work all sorts of hours to pay off this mortgage. His whole life was about earning money to pay off his mortgage. And I thought, you know, if you got a smaller house, you could actually enjoy life a bit more, you know, go out somewhere and have a meal. But, you know, there's only wanting the bigger and better and the price you had to pay. So if we have a reasonable level of contentment in our life, yeah, it's good fortune. You know. If you really see that you don't need a lot of things to be happy. And that was one of the first really big insights I had while I was working. And it was such a relief when I realised I didn't have to have the best job, the best position, the best of this to be happy. It was such a relief. I had enough. I realised I had enough to be happy. I had enough food, a job, a flat, and a bit of spending money. It was a great relief to know that I didn't need a lot more to be happy. And that was, you know, before I was a monk. Of course, as a monk, it's really part of our training, you know, to be content with what's ever offered in terms of food, lodgings, medicine, and clothing. So this robe here is my Sunday best, my Monday best, my Tuesday best. So it was quite, this evening I'd only say, which robe shall I put on tonight? So we asked to really just be content with having a few things and modest dwellings and things. So in Chitta Spanasa we have kutis, you know, little huts that we live in, just modest sizes, and the wood burning stoves to keep us warm in the cold season. And I was joking with my drivers because this evening we didn't find the place where I was staying very easily. So I was saying maybe tonight it's the root of a tree for me, you know, if we don't find where I'm staying. Because the Buddha said if you can't find anywhere, be content with the root of a tree. But fortunately we did find my dwelling, so I don't have to stay at the root of a tree tonight. But it won't be so bad here. In England it's no good news, too cold, you know. But Singapore, you could survive. So, yeah, it's a good thing to contemplate contentment in our life. And the last quality, kitanyuta, gratitude, appreciation of what we have. Yeah. And when you look how your life in Singapore is and what you have compared to what a lot of people have to bear with in other countries. You're very fortunate. You've got a reasonable standard of living. You have the opportunity to come to the monastery and practice the Dhamma. All these sort of very good supportive conditions you have. Nobody's persecuting you because of your religion now in Singapore. You have freedom to practice the Dhamma. Come here. So to appreciate what we have, and that's a very good attitude. And even a survey in England said people who appreciate what they have are happier people. Where people are always thinking, again, needing more, getting more, and always complaining that they don't have this, they don't have that. I hear a lot of people complain in England, even though they have a lot, they still complain. And I've told this story before, but maybe I'll tell it again. But in 1980, while I was still working as an engineer, I went on a pilgrimage to India. I don't know if any of you have been on pilgrimage to India. Conditions probably now are better, but in 1980, the conditions of what people lived in, it was a real eye-opener. I've never seen anything like it. And you go to you think going to Bodh Gaya, enlightenment place of the Buddha. Wow, this sort of expectation, And then you get there, and you're confronted with a line of beggars with all these deformities. And then that's what you see, so much poverty and people living in very basic conditions and just struggling to survive. Beggars everywhere. And you go to the holy places and there's lines of beggars and people holding out, looking very thin, ragged clothes. You see the houses just like mud huts. So that was a real eye-opener to see how people live in other places, and poverty. So after India, I returned to work, and it's pay rise time. And everyone just had their pay rises, and of course people are complaining they didn't get enough. And I couldn't complain. And actually I did probably irritated my friends. I said, if you think you're having a hard time, you want to go to India. Really see how much you got. So it really was good to see that, and for me to be able to contemplate appreciation for what I had, rather than complaining about not having this and not having that. Yeah. But again, I think this is a quality that you don't hear much of people appreciating, like young people, appreciating what they have. It could change, but just this seems to be the mood of the society, about these qualities of respectfulness, modesty, contentment, gratitude. We feel these qualities are a bit on the decline. Because people tend to conditioned to be more like self-centered, and self-centered is always about, I shouldn't, respect you because I'm as good as you are. And an ego-centered mind is not modest; it wants the attention. A more self-centered mind doesn't tend to be grateful for what one has, always wants more, and doesn't appreciate what one has. So I see those qualities as cultivated to lessen our sense of ego and conceit, to bring these more modest qualities into our life. So I think I'll offer these thoughts for you to reflect on, and like the Buddha and teachers say, whatever is useful, please bear it in mind. If it's not been useful, don't worry about it. We're not trying to force views on people, we're just offering things for reflection. Okay.
Dạ,